this video, we're back with another adventure in the mystical and magical world of Photoshop, and of course, we're going to talk about video editing. Now, Photoshop is not really a software that is meant for video editing. There are other great softwares for it, like Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, several many. And I should say software, because the plural of software is software, not softwares. I think I should correct myself sometimes. Anyway, now, in Photoshop, you can do little things. You can just import videos, you can do a few edits and you can export it. However, it's way more convenient to do that in software like Premiere Pro or DaVinci Resolve, Sony Vegas, any of the video editing software of your choice. However, you can do little interesting things like creating a cinematograph that we're gonna do in this video. Although Photoshop is not meant for video editing, you can use Photoshop for video editing. You can take advantage of Photoshop in your video editing process, even if you're using any other software. Like let's say you're editing your video in Premiere Pro, and let's say you're very comfortable with color grading in Photoshop. So you can create a color grading preset in Photoshop and import that in Premiere Pro for your videos. And we will also do that. So without any further ado, let's get started. Alright, so for the very first example, here we have an interesting video of hot water being poured on a glass cup. I think it's a cup. All right. Now what we want to do, we want to create a cinematograph. A cinematograph is a continuous loop of a video where you just cannot tell where is the starting or the ending. It just goes on forever. Doesn't make sense? Let's create one together. All right. That rhymed, by the way. So let's open up Photoshop. I have it already open. All you gotta do is to drag and drop that video file into Photoshop. Now Photoshop also has a timeline, just like any other video editing software. Once you open a video, you should see a timeline. If you don't see the timeline, simply go to Window and then make sure timeline is checked. Now an easier way to see all of the timeline and have it docked in perfectly is simply drag it, and just once you begin to see that blue highlight, just stop right there. It just docks in right there. Now here we have the video. If you scroll through it, you see the whole thing. Now, as you can see, this is not Premiere Pro, so the playback is not that smooth. Anyway, so now, even now, the resolution is not, the preview is not really at 100%. The preview is at 50%. If you go to the settings, if you look at the resolution, it is 50%. If you set it to 100%, it's going to be even slower. So you can set resolution accordingly. If you go 25%, the preview resolution would be lower, but it'll be a little more smoother. Now, none of this matters while you save it, while you export it. This is just for preview and making your overall process faster. So let's set it to about 50%. Now, I'm going to make the timeline a little larger. And while creating a cinematograph, the only thing that you have to keep in mind is that the starting has to be the same as the ending. Now, there are loads of ways to make this happen. A lot of people create masks. If you're into some complex cinemagraphs, you can also invert the clip and do lots of acrobats with clips to kind of make that happen. But the basic principle here is that the start of the clip should be the same as the end of the clip. All right. Now, in this case, it will be very simple. Again, if you want to go in depth in Cinemagraph, that can also be another whole course of its own. All right. Let's do a simple one with this one. Now, you see that small mountain icon and the big mountain icon? It just is a preview thing. If you slide towards the right, see, the preview is getting bigger. The clip is not being lengthened. The preview is getting bigger. All right. So this preview is a little more comfortable for us. Now, once you open a video, Photoshop puts it in a video group. You can have it if you want. You cannot have it. I kind of right click on it and usually ungroup it. It is a little more convenient for me. Video group is useful when you have lots of clips in the same series, but in this case, we are creating a cinematograph. Anyway, so we need to find a place where the water is a little consistent. So at this moment, it starts falling and it's not very consistent, and the waves or the flow is very random. So we need to find a place where it is getting a little consistent. So slowly and gradually drag it to the right, see what works for you. So if you ask me, at this point right over there, the water is a little more consistent. So we will just drag the front and bring it to that point. All right. Okay, done. Now you can just bring the clip all the way to the beginning. Now, find a place where the flow is similar to the beginning. So right here, this is the flow, and find a place where the flow is a little similar and in that same position. You can also create a duplicate of that layer, decrease the opacity to see where exactly the flow matches up. But I'm gonna take a wild guess here and say that it's at about this moment, right? I'm gonna stop right over here. It's very similar. So we're gonna go with this location. See? Now, all we had to do is to just make the clip of that size. Okay? Now we have something similar. Let's make the preview a little larger. Okay? Now we need a copy of this one. To make a copy, just drag the layer and drop it the plus sign. And if you, let me just take away the navigator so that you can see everything clearly. All right, let's go for a little larger icons. Okay, so now here we have one clip at the top and at the bottom we have another clip. So we want that by the end, the beginning happens. So here's what we do. We bring the bottom clip all the way to the right. Okay, just like this. So when the end happens, the beginning comes, right? But we want a nice transition for it. Okay, so first of all, we'll just extend it. You can extend the clip as much as you want. That's up to you. If it's extendable that much, I'm just going to extend it. Now we know this is the beginning, right? And you can actually cut the clip from here, or you can just bring this side to this side. Okay. Now, when the beginning comes, the ending, we need to fade it. So to fade it, let's select that layer and then click on this arrow right there. And what property of a particular layer do we use to fade it? To make it more and more transparent, and that is opacity. We decrease the opacity to make it more transparent. So all we have to do is to find a place where we begin to decrease the opacity. So I guess that probably this is a nice place to decrease the opacity. What do you think? All right, or maybe a little more ahead. That's up to you. So let's start with this one. Let's see where it goes. And we want to click on this stopwatch icon next to opacity. This is where we want the opacity to be 100%. And as it goes towards the end, we want the opacity to be 0. So click on this point, click on this diamond, and we want the opacity here to be 0. So it goes from 100 to 0. Now you can just adjust where the opacity starts fading. That's up to you. See it fade. Now you have done it. We have edited it together. So we know that it's a trick right over there. But you have to find a happy place where most people cannot tell. So I believe that this is where most people cannot tell. And now when you play it, let me zoom out. Now when you play it, it will be continuous. First of all, let's go to settings and make sure loop playback is checked. And let's play this. Let's see what happens. Now it's going to take a little while as it's also processing, and it's playing at 9 FPS. So bear with me on that. Because the resolution is at 50%. Photoshop, again, is not really meant for it, so it's a little slow. However, now it is processed. Now have a look. Don't look at the timeline, just look at the photo. Look, it's continuous. Isn't that super fun? It just goes on and on and on and on forever. And it's hard to tell where it ends and where it begins. Isn't that pretty cool? All right. So some people can tell if you just watch carefully. Now what you can do, you can play with this. You can bring it a little more further. You cannot tell now, but you can see the fade now. So you have to find that sweet spot where you cannot see the fade, and also you cannot tell and you cannot make out the sudden transition. So right now I feel that it's a good place to be. Let's see. Yes, maybe a little more ahead would do. So let's go here a little more ahead, probably like this would work. Now, how do we save it? Again, you can save it as a GIF or a GIF, however you want to pronounce it, and then upload it to social media or wherever you want. Now there is one more problem I see here. As it goes towards the transition, everything looks fine. The water transitions pretty nicely. I'm going to go a little further ahead. The water transitions pretty nicely, no problem with that. But there's a problem that the utensil from which the water is falling, that suddenly shows up. So right now there is no utensil, or from wherever, the kettle, or from wherever the water is coming. It's not showing up. But when the transition begins to happen, it just begins to show up like magic. So how do we fix that? Again, you can use content aware, there are lots of things. But to simplify stuff, let's simply crop it. Press C for the crop tool, and we want to crop the top a little bit. Okay, just like that. And you can also crop the sides if you want. You can make it square. It can be a little more convenient. So if you want it square, you can choose 1:1 ratio from right here. That might be convenient for a lot of social media. Hit enter or return. You can crop it to your liking. I just wanted to hide that kettle or whatever. So now let's go ahead and play it. Let's see how the results are. I'm going to decrease the resolution to 25% for faster processing. And let's play it. Now it's moving a bit, don't worry about that. It's just the preview thing, don't worry. So if I just increase the resolution, I think it won't move. Yeah, it was just a glitch there. No problem with the video. See, it's working fine. See, you cannot tell the beginning and the end. Now let's export it. We want to export it as a forever looping GIF. Let's go to File and then Export. And in here, we're going to choose Save for Web. Let's go ahead and choose that. Now it's going to take a little while. This is a little slow. As I told you, this is Photoshop and it likes to take its sweet time to process. Now, of course, you can save it as GIF. Now you can change the settings here if you want to. I'm just going to leave it at that. And you can also change the resolution from here. Just keep in mind, whatever you do, in the end, make sure that the looping options right here is set to forever, so that when you open the GIF file, it just loops on forever, not once, forever. All right, and you can save it. Let's click on save. And right now, as you can see, the size is going to be around 85 MB. So you can decrease the percentage, or decreasing the percentage would simply decrease the resolution. So to reduce the file size, anyway, let's click on save. I'm going to save it in this folder and click on save. Now the GIF seems to have been exported. Let's open that folder. And this is our example 1 GIF. Let's open that and have a look. It just continues to go on and on and on and on forever. Isn't that fun? So let's move on to our second part of the tutorial. Let's say you're editing your videos and you want Photoshop for color grading those. How do you use that? How do you use Photoshop just for color grading your video sequence? Here's how. All right. So here we are in Premiere or any other video editing software of your choice. Really doesn't matter. Just a professional video editing software. Anything would do. Anything that accepts LUTs. And I'm sure most of them do. So this is one of the videos. Let me just decrease the volume. I'm sorry about that. This is one of the videos for a tutorial on YouTube that I had created, that I had recorded. And this is the raw footage from the camera. Okay. So here's what we do. Let's go to any part of the video, doesn't really matter, and just export a screenshot of that. You can take a screenshot from here, but it would be more ideal if you exported a screenshot. So I'm just going to click on this button. If you don't see this button in Premiere, click on the plus right there and make sure that icon is there. If it's not, you can just drag it right over here. What are the most important icons? Or you can click from here as well. Anyway, so I'm just going to click on this button and I'm going to save it as capture on mesh. And let's save it as JPEG. And to choose where you want to save it, simply click on Browse. I've opened the same folder and let's click on Select Folder and hit OK. Now, let's open that folder. Here is the capture. Let's drag it and drop it into Photoshop, and we're going to use Photoshop to color grade it. So let's drop it right over there. Okay, great. Now we don't need the timeline anymore. So let's just close that and let's start color grading. Now, you can use any methods for color grading. You can do whatever you want right over here. I'm just going to start with maybe adding some contrast. So let's create a curves adjustment layer. And I see that there's nothing here. So I'm going to take the right slider a little bit to the left and hold the Alt key or the Option key while you do that, just to see when you begin to lose details. So at this point, we really begin to lose details. So I'm going to stop right over there and maybe a little earlier and make it overall brighter slightly. I think that would do. So this is just making it slightly brighter. Now the other problem that I see with my skin is that there's a lot of green to it. So let's take away the green by creating a hue saturation adjustment layer. With the help of the hand, click on the skin and then take the saturation and the hue all the way to the right to see which areas are being affected. Then you can start playing with these sliders, with the range sliders, to just target just the skin tones. So I think this is a good target. So I might have moved a little too much. So we're gonna back off a little. Or just see which areas are green, you know. I feel that these areas, I'm just gonna click right over there, okay? And now again, take the hue and the saturation all the way to the left. And then move. All right. Make the transition smoother. Make the transition smoother, okay? Now all we gotta do is to bring it back to 0 and play with the hue. See, it fixes that. You can also play with the saturation if you want to, but that basically fixes it. Now, there's a little bit of blue that accidentally happened, I guess. So if we go to yellows, you would see that. Anyway, so let's bring it back to 0. The one that we are dealing with is yellows, not yellows 2 that Photoshop created. Anyway, now I see that there are certain areas that I feel that if we brighten it, because the light is creating a lot of contrast, and it's just, I don't feel good about it enhancing my eye bags. So let's brighten that area. And keep in mind, LUTs do not support masks. So we have to be careful of that. We cannot use masks and simply brighten that area up. That's not going to happen. So we're going to create a hue saturation adjustment layer, another hue saturation adjustment layer. And first of all, let's target just that area by, again, using the hand and clicking right over there. Increase the saturation and the hue all the way to the right, and then make the range very, very narrow. And just when that area is targeted, we can stop. So let's make the hue saturation a little wider so that it's easier for us. Okay, now it's beginning to get targeted. This is of course too much. Make it a little softer. Anyway, I know a lot of it has been selected, but doesn't matter. All we have to do is to brighten those areas. To brighten those areas, we will simply increase the lightness there. And as we increase the lightness, we also have to increase the saturation a bit. And if you want, you can also take the hue a little more to the left. Okay, let's go for -4. I don't know, I have a thing with odd numbers. Anyway, so I was just going to apply masks, but I just remembered we cannot do that. So we only wanted to brighten these dark areas. So double click on the right hand side of the layer, and we want to take it away from the bright areas by taking the slider of the underlying layer from right to left, like this. And we want it right over here. So we just stop right here, hold the Alt key or the Option key, click on it to break it apart, and make the transition smoother. Make it just like that. And have a look. Look what a change it makes. Here's the before, here's the after. See that? Now, of course, this is too much. Let's go for 50%. You know, that's nice. On top of that, I feel that the highlights are just too much. So we're going to create a curves adjustment layer. And with the help of the hand right there, these are the highlights that we want to take down. These are the highlights as well. Just take it down like this a bit. Then we're going to use Blend If, double click on the right hand side of the layer to only have it in the highlights. So take it away from the shadow areas and let's just only have it in the highlights. Hold the Alt key, the Option key to break it apart and click on it to break it apart. We want it only in these highlight areas. And let's do it. Okay, hit OK. So there you go. See how it's taking away the highlights? Let me show you the before and after. Here's the before, here's the after. See that? It doesn't look like much, but to me it does. Now, on top of that, again, you can just keep on creating curves and adjustment layers, but I feel that let's finish it up with a color lookup table. And let's go with, you can try late sunset, that's too much. Crisp warm, just works all the time. I love the warmth right over there. Let's go with 20% here. Just a little bit of crisp warm goes a long way. And have a look. Isn't that fantastic? Here's the before, here's the after. You have definitely come a long, long way. All right, this is not much. This is not nearly what I do. I do tons of other things as well. But let's say you are video editing and you're comfortable with Photoshop and you want to use a preset like this throughout your video or in other videos that you shoot. Once you have created it, let's go to File, Export, and then Color Lookup Tables. Now to export a color lookup table, you need to have a background layer, a locked background layer, something to slap things on. Anyway, let's choose Color Lookup Tables. And you can just leave the description the way it is. 32 medium is fine. Cube format, if you want to export it in other formats, you can do it as well. Now hit OK. Let's save it. It is done. Now, if we go back to Premiere Pro, and if let's say we go to effects, and if we apply a Lumetri effect right there, Lumetri color, let's drag it onto the clip. Now, if we come down to our effects control section right there, inside of Lumetri, you can go to creative, and you can also do color grading using Lumetri, which I do all the time. And along with that, you can also use that LUT. So what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to import that LUT by you clicking on the drop down menu right over there beside look, which is lookup table, LUT. Anyway, let's click on browse, and here I am at the same folder. We're going to choose capture and mesh.cube. Let's open that and have a look. This is applied right over there. Now here's the before, here's the after. See that? Now on top of that, along with it, if you want a little more contrast or want to do a little more correction, you can do that. I would just decrease the blacks a bit, -10, and then probably decrease the overall exposure to -0.4, not -4, -0.4. Okay. So let's set it to 0. Let's see how it feels. 0 is kind of too much. -0.3 or -0.2. Okay. And maybe a little bit of contrast here. So I think there is some contrast. Let's go for 40 or 25. Okay. And you know what really makes the image pop? This is a 1080p footage. If you really want to make it look like 4K, even if you're showing it in 1080p, you can just come down and increase the sharpness. Let's go for 50%. You would see the change. Right now, if you cannot see it, let me just zoom in for you. Here is the before. Here's before sharpening. Here's after sharpening. Just look at it. Makes a ton of difference, doesn't it? Let's increase the sharpness to 100 so that you can see the difference. Here's the after. You see the difference right there? Now, of course, this is very heavy-handed. Let's go for about 50. Great. So that all really helps. I use all of that and bring them together to create a LUT. And right now, I'm applying it on this video. So along with this LUT, there are lots of other things also applied, lots of other Lumetri color. Actually, I apply 3 Lumetri color effects to bring this what you're seeing right now. Anyway, so that's about video editing in Photoshop. You can do little things in Photoshop like creating cinemagraphs, and you can use Photoshop, take advantage of Photoshop in your video editing process by creating LUTs. And also, of course, using Photoshop, you can create the end titles, or you can design the intro a little bit. You can do that. Those are a given. But these are the basic video editing tools that you can use in Photoshop. The second was not really a video editing tool, but that is actually very useful in the practical world. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. I hope you learned something new. And if you did, I encourage you to get creative with cinemagraphs. Create not only this type of cinemagraph, but different kinds of cinemagraph. Just keep in mind the starting is the same as the ending. That's all you have to do. That's all you have to achieve. Secondly, if you are into video editing, use Photoshop to color grade a little bit for a change. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next lesson. Till then, stay tuned and make sure that you keep creating.